being able to actually see the OG Terrakion is quite nice.
Yeah, especially paired up with that Whimsicott as well. And then you're obviously looking as well in this team. Is there a Trick Room mode here with that Farigiraf? And you would probably say, yes, there is. The Farigiraf has the ability to twist the dimensions. So you've got both forms of speed control here with the Whimsicott, Farigiraf. You've got Tailwind, you've got Trick Room, you've got a lot of flexibility with a lot of big hit as you look through the team there. The Fluttermane, the Chi-Yu, the Glamora, all Pokemon that are very dangerous if left unchecked. But we're going to kick off, pass it over to yourself to take it over for Wolfe's team.
Indeed, we've got Urshifu, Rapid Strike, Choice Scarf, Incineroar, Safety Goggles, Fluttermane, Booster Energy, Amundia, Citrus Berry, Landorus Incarnate with the Sheer Force and Life Orb, and the Focus Sash, Tornadus Incarnate, which actually rocks that Rain Dance, which pairs up very nicely with that burst mode of the Urshifu pairing with a Choice Scarf and being able to just absolutely dispatch great amounts of damage.
Yeah, we'll come over to this side of the field, and it is going to be Sebi's team. The Whimsicott, the Farigiraf, Glamora, Chi-Yu, Fluttermane, and that illustrious Terrakion.
Covert Cloak, not something you typically see.
No, not something you see very often at all. It does give you the immunity to that fake out though, which is very nice, especially at turn 1 if you're in a position where you look at the Whimsicott, it's got the Terra Ghost, right? So you Terra Ghost, and then you're immune to fake out, and then you go for the beat up potentially into the Terrakion, it can't be faked out either. Right. Then you can just launch those rock slides off. If you are getting the Terrakion up to +6, it's going to be hitting very hard. And it also has that handy upper hand move as well, which is a priority attack, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great. It's a really good sort of utility tool to be able to just shut down any priority moves coming out from the other side. It hits very powerfully, especially whilst being dispatched by a Terrakion with a fighting type as same type attack bonus boost. But yeah, I think it's sort of one of the niche picks that do incredibly well in closed team sheets, but still have some room in open team sheets.
The question I would ask you, Costa, going into this match, looking on just paper here, the Urshifu that Wolfe's got feels like it's going to be really problematic for Sebi to deal with, especially when you look at the Tornadus here. It's got access to the Tailwind, it can match the Tailwind from the Whimsicott. The Whimsicott hasn't got access to Taunt to be able to shut that down. So you're going to have to match for match, but then you've got the Urshifu with the Scarf that already puts itself above that Terrakion. So we'll answer that question later. We're getting into the match.
Oh, getting into the match indeed, and like you correctly pointed out there, Lee, we do have the Tornadus and the Urshifu being such a prominent threat for Sebastian's team at the moment. So really good call out there from Wolfe versus the Glamora and Whimsicott. So you've immediately got some really good offensive pressure coming out of the Glamora. It does, of course, have the potential of terrestrializing into grass, so it may force a U-turn play from the Urshifu, so something that Wolfe is going to really have to take into consideration.
Yeah, and it has nice access to those sludge bombs, to the earth powers. You can fire into that Urshifu here and really start doing some good damage, especially if you do go for that terrestrialization. We aren't seeing it here, just the Tailwind coming out from that Whimsicott and the Meteor Beam straight away from this Glamora.
No Tailwind from that Tornadus, allowing the Glamora to get ahead and get that speed advantage. Special attack boost, and the Meteor Beam does connect. This is the same type attack bonus, ladies and gents, but it's not, of course, enough to pick up the KO due to the typing resistance there. Surging Strikes, it doesn't even need to connect with the third hit there. It will be picking up a KO, but most importantly, the Toxic Debris will now have 2 sets of layers on the field. So any grounded Pokemon from Wolfe's side that are not immune to the poison typing will have to be wary unless there's another poison type over on Wolfe's side.
Yeah, and he does have that poison type maybe lurking in the back. We'll have to wait and see, but the Amoonguss could be an option here to come in and just soak up those toxic spikes to get that away. We're going to see Blink Wind Storm into the Whimsicott, not quite enough to take it down, activating that Focus Sash. So, going to stick around for at least one more turn here.
It will indeed, and there's actually a speed drop on that Whimsicott as well. Most likely not going to come into play because Whimsicott is an enabler of sorts for its partner Pokemon. So Sebastian is likely going to want to try to bring in a sweeper of sorts. And now that we know that Wolfe's locked into the Surging Strikes from Urshifu, it means that Terrakion really needs to take that into consideration and likely have to try to exhaust its terrestrialization in order to cover and resist it with the grass type. But no, we actually have the Farigiraf.
Yeah, it's probably a better option to bring in right now, I think, instead of the Trachean. Like you say, it would be awkward. You're kind of having to commit that terrestrialization in front of this Urshifu, knowing what it was locked into. So to try and get around that, circumvent it a little bit, the Farigiraf feels like a good option here. Going to be able to soak up attacks from both sides of the field pretty easily and potentially maybe even just pick up a knockout on that Urshifu, or at least pressure if the Amoonguss is the slot that is going to come in for that Urshifu in this situation.
And I do quite like the Farigiraf coming here, sort of adds to the dual speed mode that Sebastian does have available to himself in case there was a tailwind setup from Wolfe's side. But we do have the terrestrialization now on the Urshifu. It will be the Water Terror, and we're looking to get very offensive here.
Yeah, it's going to be boosting that attack even further and boosted further by the rain from this Tornado, setting up the rain that'll last for 5 turns. The Dazzling Gleam coming out from the Whimsicott, not enough to pick up the Urshifu, but the Hyper Voice following up, picking up a huge KO on the Urshifu here before it is able to attack.
That is such a speedy Farigiraf. You see that Wolfe wasn't actually anticipating the Choice Scarf Urshifu being outsped by this Farigiraf, so really nice touch there. As, of course, it does get that special attack boost due to the Throat Spray.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate there for Wolfe losing the terrestrialization now, but such a surprise from Sebi doing so well, training that Farigiraf not like you would expect it to be, and really catching Wolfe off guard with that big Hyper Voice, and then at the same time activating that Throat Spray, giving it a +1 to its special attack, becoming a real threat going forward. The Amoonguss coming in now for Wolfe, allowing him a little bit more room to adjust.
And having Psyshock at +1 of its special attack is such a great utility. Wolfe doesn't have terrestrialization left, but the Fake Tears will allow so much damage coming out from this Hyper Voice. Not enough to pick up the KO on the Amoonguss. It does get rid of the Tornadus, but it does allow the Farigiraf to now be susceptible to a likely Spore into the slot.
Yeah, that's the big question here. The Amoonguss surviving, getting that Citrus Berry, which is so good, and the Spore coming out now into that Farigiraf. Going to put it to sleep and give Wolfe a little bit of room to breathe here, because this Farigiraf is becoming such a threat very, very quickly.
And I think Sebastian did take into consideration a potential Incineroar lurking in the back, and may have not felt confident going for the Psyshock focus into the slot, hence why trying to optimize with a better middle ground play of a sort of boosted Hyper Voice. But we did see the special attack boost via the boost energy on the flow domain.
Yeah, so we'll be hitting it a lot harder, of course, having to rely on the Dazzling Gleam to really do that spread damage. You want to remove the Whimsicott as soon as possible. You've seen it be really disruptive with that Fake Tears. You don't really want your Fluttermane taking any of those, but that's what we're going to see. It is going to be going into the Fluttermane, lowering that special defense by 2 stages, meaning if this Farigiraf can wake up after this turn, it will be doing a lot of damage.
It will indeed, but prior to that, the Whimsicott will be going down. So this is quite crucial and dependent on what the final Pokemon is over on Sebastian's side, as the Sludge Bomb will be targeting down the Farigiraf, not quite enough to pick up the KO, as the Tailwind will expire. So this is the part of a dual speed control mode of a team that Sebastian would have really liked having the Trick Room set up.
Yeah, I think if you could have potentially set the Trick Room up there, it would have put you in great. Well, it would have put you probably in a worse position, because you've got the Amoonguss out, and Wolfe's able to check that with the lower speed on that side of things. So covering speed spectrums quite well here. The Fluttermane now in a nice position where it is going to be able to take advantage of the Beads of Ruin that's come onto the field from the Chi-Yu. Going to be able to knock out the Farigiraf pretty easily with the Dazzling Gleam based on the previous damage. The Chi-Yu not in the greatest position now. The rain's up, not really going to be able to get the most out of those fire type attacks that it might want to rely on, especially against the Amoonguss.
It may even have to come to a Snarl, but likely you want to try to at least guarantee the KO onto the Fluttermane and allow the Farigiraf, depending on when it can wake up, to dispatch of the Amoonguss. But this is quite crucial right now. The Fluttermane is at -2 of its special defense. This is Beads of Ruin that's on the field. Choice Specs boosted, and of course the terrestrialization here, wanting to perhaps avoid and completely ignore that Amoonguss.
Yeah, this is a really clever terrestrialization here. Immunity to Spore now because of that grass typing. The Dazzling Gleam coming out, picking up the Farigiraf, taking the Chi-Yu down to 50% health.
But it's quite crucial right now, because it depends on whether there is a connect from him. No, actually Snarl avoids the Amoonguss, doesn't pick up the KO on the Fluttermane, but my lord, the amount of damage, and there's the Sludge Bomb, absolutely reading the terrestrialization, allowing the Amoonguss to pick up this game one in what is a complete turnaround.
What a ferocious end to this game, and Wolfe looking like he was on the back foot there in the losing position, but at the last moment, getting that sludge bomb off into the Chi-Yu, being able to pick up the knockout, the Snarl missing onto the Amoonguss, unfortunate, but the Flutterman hung on, took down the Farigiraf. What a quick, fast and furious game that was.
It really, really was. There was a lot of tailwind situations from Sebastian. Having that Farigiraf completely outspeed Choice Scarf Urshifu is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just something that no one would expect, and it makes sort of sense with the composition Sebastian's brought, given the fact that there's no Pokemon to completely capitalize off of a Trick Room mode.
Completely wild, because in that situation I was thinking, oh, you've got the tailwind up, but
Yeah.
with the Farigiraf having the Trick Room, you feel, is it going to be able to outspeed in this position?
Right.
It did.
Yeah,
And it really did. And I think it caught not only us off guard, but I think Wolfe off guard as well. Really, probably wouldn't commit to that terrestrialization in those normal circumstances. Bit unfortunate for Sebi, really didn't get the most value out of the Glimmora. Got some nice damage onto the Urshifu, but really you kind of want to get a little bit more out of that Pokemon. Maybe bring something else to that to deal. If you were Sebi going into this next game, what would you bring to deal with that Urshifu? Because I think that's the main priority. If you are going to tackle the Urshifu, you want to remove it from the field, and then it frees up some of your other Pokemon to come in to do the work.
I might not even change up that much, if I'm completely honest. There could be a case of bringing, I'm not sure, the Flutter Mane itself straight off the bat, but then you're sort of susceptible to things. And yes, there is a Chi-Yu with a Terra-type grass, but it ends up being a mind game of whether there's a U-turn or a focus of the Surging Strikes in there.
Yeah, that's a really good point, I think. Yeah, and you're also committing to that terrestrialization very early on in the match. And when everything's on the line here for Sebi, he needs to go into this next game to tie it up. He needs a win here to take it to a game 3 to keep his EUIC dreams alive. So really committing to something that could be viewed as a little bit careless, potentially based on probably a 50-50, something you want to try and avoid. It's very difficult, but here we go, Costa, getting into this game 2 and round 9 at the EUIC 2024 Championships.
Here we go. This is going to be a very critical game here. Tornadus Urshifu, same leads from Wolf's side, but we do have a change up over on Sebastian's side, being the Farigiraf. It is well placed to be able to at least deal very respectable neutral damage, whilst adding to mind games of whether there's a Trick Room set up or not.
Yeah, that's the thing. If the Trick Room goes up here, you're expecting maybe a Tailwind from the Whimsicott. Do you go for Tailwind yourself with the Tornadus? I think Wolf's got an easy turn where he could potentially go for the Rain Dance, terrestrialize again, and go for that Surging Strikes. Whatever you're going to hit, I think on Sebi's side of the field is going to take huge damage from that kind of bolstered attacking option. So really there is an option, but if you do allow the Trick Room to go up, it could be detrimental. Maybe this is why we potentially are going to see a bit of a switch up.
Ooh, as Flutter Mane does switch in, and we do know, of course, it has that booster energy, it will most likely be indicative to the speed heightening, but no, it's actually, of course, it is a special attack as we've seen. So wanting to try to commit in this scenario is going to be tough, because Sebastian really needs to get this turn 1 call right if he wants to try to push this game 3 potential.
Yeah, and I think it all comes down really to this turn, how it plays out. We are seeing Wolfe start off with the terrestrialization on that Tornadus here. The Dazzling Gleam fired out, no Tailwind from the Whimsicott, doing some respectable damage to both targets.
Oh, but we have an avoid of the Whimsicott there. It doesn't actually get its damage dealt there. Focus Sash broken. We do have the Hyper Voice focus here, so just wanted to guarantee some sort of damage, maybe pick up the KO if possible into the Urshifu. However, having the double ghost interaction there with the Hyper Voice is such a nice play there.
Yeah, such a great play from Wolfe. I think we need to talk about it a bit, but because of that Hyper Voice, could proccing the Throat Spray, you want to avoid that great terrestrialization from the Tornadus. You kind of realize after it starts, you're like, the Hyper Voice, and it's exactly what happens. Tailwind now coming out from the Whimsicott, going to try and get some speed advantage, but matched by Wolfe's Tornadus as well.
Well done. This is the sort of scenario that Wolfe was trying to hope towards in order to at least bring stability and a stalemate in terms of speed control, as Psyshock will be targeting down the Flutter Mane and just barely misses the KO. Really good damage from this Flutter Mane, being able to now essentially bring both of Sebi's Pokemon down to orange.
Yeah, and that's pretty huge. I think having both ghosts on the field, you put this Farigiraf in a position where it is locked in a way where it can't get that special attack boost. So as long as these ghosts are on the field, you can't utilize that Hyper Voice, and you can't really get the maximum benefit from this Pokemon. We are just seeing the Fluttermane protect, along with that Farigiraf protect on Sebi's side of the field, and the Whimsicott going to fire off a Dazzling Gleam.
It will, and if, of course, the Tornadus does somehow go down here, Wolfe always has that option of bringing the Urshifu Choice Scarf straight into the fray, but the Bleak Windstorm does connect this time round. It does, of course, pick up the KO onto the Whimsicott, so at least Sebi will have a Pokemon he could bring in right now in order to capitalize off of this, but it's going to have to be able to completely answer and not fall down to the offensive pressure of this Fluttermane, and that seems to be its own mirrored Pokemon.
Yeah, well, we know why. Fluttermane is one of the most used Pokemon here. We are seeing that booster energy activating on the Fluttermane and boosting the speed on this Fluttermane, so meaning that the Fluttermane on Sebi's side of the field going to be the fastest one out of both his and Wolf. So you think you've got the advantage here. Both Tailwinds are set up in this position. You can potentially get rid of the Fluttermane here on Wolf's side of the field, or go for a Dazzling Gleam here and potentially pick up a double knockout if nothing switches or protects.
I think what you have to be worried about is an Amoonguss switching here, but having the potential of the Psyshock available on your side of the field means that the Amoonguss isn't really safe to actually switch in here, and it's going to be a tough decision for Wolf to take into consideration.
And neither's that Urshifu as well. That is not going to want to switch in on a Dazzling Gleam or a Psyshock, exactly. So you're pinned really. If you want to make a switch, you've got to go for the Amoonguss and hope that Sebi doesn't get that slot right.
Oh, but we're going to have to see how it turns out. It is going to be the switch up. Amoonguss does come in, but does Sebi target down correctly here and try to get that guaranteed sort of scenario playing out to himself as we have the Terrestrialization over on Sebi's side.
And it is going to be the Fluttermane going for that Fairy Terror type, boosting those Fairy type attacks going into this next turn. Going to be enough to potentially pick up a knockout on that Tornadus, and if it does, it leaves the Amoonguss open for a Psyshock.
It does, however, the Protect does come out. It means Tornadus is trying to allow itself room to get another Tailwind set up to have that advantageous speed control over Sebi's side as the Whimsicott has been felled, but Amoonguss taking that incredibly well, which is naturally expected, but Hyper Voice rather than Psyshock in order to allow this Farigiraf more room to have even more damage output in the subsequent turn.
That is a very brave play, but I think in these situations, at this setting, at the tournament, you need to take these brave decisions.
Yep.
The Hyper Voice risky in front of two Ghost-type Pokemon, but pretty sure that Wolf would have to switch out in that scenario, taking advantage, getting that Throat Spray activated while the opportunity is there. Now the Farigiraf in a position where it can go for that Psyshock into the Amoonguss slot pretty freely now. Anything that switches in there is going to take huge damage. Yes, you can get a Tailwind up with your Tornadus if you're Wolf, but at the same time, you're probably losing both of these Pokemon.
You are, and it's quite tough because you want to at least be able to allow the Tornadus to have another Tailwind set up towards the mid to end game. So that's why I feel like it's a bit tantalizing making the decision on, do I allow my Fluttermane to go down and have Tornadus as a win condition later on to allow my Urshifu to be enabled by speed advantage?
Well, we are going to see the Tornadus switch out. Wolf wanting to preserve that for later, like you say, wanting to get that Tailwind and set up at the right time. Fluttermane going to hit the field once again for him, but very low health. Very susceptible to going down here. The Amoonguss not wanting to go down freely, protecting this turn, going to avoid any damage coming out. The Dazzling Gleam from Sebi's Fluttermane going to be probably enough to pick up the knockout onto Wolves.
But I'm quite curious, there may even be a play here for Sebi to try to go for Trick Room, but surely you can't when you're facing an Amoonguss, even if there's a Choice Scarf in the back and Tornado. So this sort of forces a lot of pressure onto Sebi's final Pokemon in order to dispatch of the Urshifu in one way. And we know that that's not exactly a real solid scenario for himself. Sure, the Fluttermane does have speed advantage, but now the Tornadus is going to be able to get the Tailwind set up and allow the Urshifu to potentially sweep up the remainder of the game.
Yeah, and it's going to be in a really good position. Like you say, it comes down to what Sebi's last Pokemon is here. The Tornadus can go for this Tailwind this turn. The Amoonguss has just protected. Do you go for another Protect here to try and avoid the knockout? It could be an option. You go Tailwind, Protect. If you get the Protect off, you're in a way better position with the Urshifu. But if you don't get the Protect off, you're really looking, like you mentioned, the Urshifu to come in under these Tailwind conditions to really clean up potentially 3 Pokemon.
There could even be a case for the Tornadoes to go for Protect in order to allow itself that room to have Urshifu immediately available in the field and sort of force the scenario for Sebastian, as we do see Dazzling Gleam once again being dispatched by this Flutter Mane. It will be followed up by likely a side shot. There's no reason not to go for it in order to guarantee a KO onto the Amoonguss, as the Tornadoes was already guaranteed.
Yeah, really good call there. The Protect on the Tornadoes, probably the best play possible here, because you want that offensive threat next to the Tornadoes when you get that Tailwind set up, rather than setting it up now, losing potentially both of these Pokemon and everything, then being on the Urshifu's shoulders. At least if you do it this way, you're able to pick things off as you go, and then maybe the Tornadoes can stick around a little bit longer, especially if you see a Hyper Voice come out or a Dazzling Gleam. At least it's spread damage and not that single target.
And this is quite nice as to the previous play of having the Throat Spray enabled from the Farigiraf, because now at least you can guarantee even more damage output. But the Hyper Voice isn't as easy to go for given the Ghost Terror on Tornadoes.
We do see the Tailwind now sit up. The Urshifu is going to be going first. It is going for the Surging Strike. It goes for 1 critical hit. 2 critical hits.
Oh, that's close.
Is it going to be enough?
Oh, it may not even be enough, and it's not enough, allowing this Flutter Mane the room to get that damage dealt onto it. It moves, it goes for the Moonblast. It will be focusing on that Urshifu, and it is out for the count. And all of a sudden, it looks like we're having a Game 3, Lee.
It's a huge survival here from the Flutter Mane, being able to take that Surging Strike. The rain not up, not boosted, and now we see a Trick Room from the Farigiraf. Now the Amoonguss has left the field. It's a perfect setting, counteracting that Tailwind and locking this game up for Sebi in style, taking it, like you say, to a Game 3.
Lovely little piece of tech right there. It's sort of the Farigiraf opting as an anti-Tailwind mode, per se, for any sort of Tailwind mirrors.
Yeah, and the only thing really holding Sebi back from being able to do that earlier in the game was that Amoonguss, picking up the final knockout onto the Tornadoes and tying this up, everything going into this Game 3.
And no reveal of the final 4th Pokemon there, which could be quite crucial into having a bit of an insight over the strategy that Sebi wanted to employ there. But I feel like there was a lot going on there. It did really feel like a battle of the Tailwinds, and who's going to be sort of left with that advantage of the speed control. And Wolfe did a really good job in order to at least match the Tailwind, but it was from the point that the Flutter Mane was such an obstacle, having that booster energy in the speed versus Wolfe's own booster energy in the special attack, that really sort of threw the balance off.
Yeah, and I like you said, Wolfe did really well to mitigate the attack damage from the Farigiraf very early on. The really smart play of identifying that the first thing Sebi's going to want to do is go for that Hyper Voice. Well, I'm going to Terastallize and switch into my Flutter Mane, get a free switch here, and I'm going to get away with it. And then from there, it looked like he had complete control of the match. Sebi then really playing very well with the tools that he had kind of at his disposal, utilizing the Flutter Mane, maybe identifying, saying, yeah, your Flutter Mane's doing a really good job. I'm going to utilize my Flutter Mane because I've got the booster energy. I can also get the Tailwind up, but I'm going to have an additional speed boost, which is going to give you a hard time. Surviving the Surging Strikes, though, was the biggest thing, because you expect in those situations, especially if you've got the speed boost with that booster energy, probably not going to be the most offensive Pokemon, but contrary to belief, Sebi proving us wrong once again with how he's trained his Pokemon. The Flutter Mane surviving and getting that crucial knockout onto the Urshifu.
It really was pivotal, and you know that the Urshifu, given that it couldn't even outspeed the Farigiraf under Tailwind conditions when it is Choice Scarf, is likely an indication it is Adamant Nature. I think that's the preferred nature when you run Choice Scarf sets in order to get as much damage as you can. So the fact that Flutter Mane survived that just really pays dividends as to how well trained in bulk that Flutter Mane was.
Yeah, completely, and I think it really throws a spanner in the works for both players here. Going into Game 3, if you're Sebi, do you go down the same game plan as you did that first game? But there's the alarm. We're going into Game 3.
Game 3 it is. This is going to be the final match of day 1. And what do you know? There's a Terrakion and a Whimsicott over on Sebi's side versus the Flutter Mane and Tornadoes over on Wolfe. So there's a lot of damage potential coming out in this very explosive Game 3.
Yeah, the Terrakion switch up from Sebi here puts a lot of offensive pressure on, especially with that beat up and rock slide combination there. The Tornado is going to be threatened by that. Of course, the Flutterman on Wolf's side really well positioned here because the Tailwind plus a Dazzling Gleam or a Moonblast probably be enough to take down that Terrakion. It's going to have to go for that Terastallization, but it looks like that is exactly what we're going to see.
Yeah, it's sort of forced in the scenario, so well identified that it is going to be opting for that Grass Terastallization. Wolfe is going to really have to hope if he tries to go in on the full offensive side of things, it can pick up a KO on the Terrakion.
Yeah, and I think that's the big key here. We're going to see a Tailwind first from this Tornadus, and then it's going to be followed up by a Dazzling Gleam. No Tailwind from the Whimsicott here. It looks like we're going to see a Dazzling Gleam come in return, and the Terrakion left to go for a big Rock Slide here, taking down that Tornadus, and breaking the sash and doing some respectable damage to that Fluttermane.
Very nice play from Sebi's side, wanting to at least guarantee he could dispatch of the speed control potential from Wolfe earlier on in the game in order to allow himself that room to be able to completely capitalize off the speed. So this may even lead to a very safe Tailwind setup from Sebastian's side in order to match that speed and maybe a bit of a defensive play over on that second slot.
I think if you are Sebastian as well, you might want to switch out the Terrakion here and preserve it for later. You are guaranteed to get your Tailwind up with the Whimsicott if you want to here. And that might play to his advantage later on in this game because Wolf's will end before Sebi's does, if that is the case and we see that play out here. So that's something that Sebi might rely on and try and get that Terrakion into the position where it has the speed advantage over these big threats initially.
But no switch outs here, just matching the Tailwind, so perhaps going for the read here. U-turn does focus on the Terrakion. It does pick up the KO, so relatively safe play at least to try to get some pivot action going for Wolfe. Unfortunately, Terrakion, as quick as it came onto the field, it has left within one turn's rate. However, the Fluttermane is now allowed to get that KO whilst Wolfe is going to be bringing the Amoonguss in.
Yeah, the Amoonguss coming back onto the field now. A really nice play here from Wolfe, taking advantage of the Tailwind he has in effect. Sebi trying to keep pace with that Tailwind, of course, but for the troubles of losing the Whimsicott and the Terrakion here, so going down in numbers, down to the last two Pokemon. There could be that pivotal turn, though, that we talked about here, where both Tailwinders on both sides of the field have now gone. The only speed control that you've got if you are Sebi is going to be that Trick Room, but the Amoonguss is always the threat here, the problem. But you've got that Chi-Yu coming onto the field now that breeds of a Ruin alongside that Farigiraf that has the ability to activate that Throat Spray. And not only that, pressure the Amoonguss as well because it has got the Size Shock, of course. You've got to remember that. And there is no safe switch for that Amoonguss this turn. If it goes out, the Urshifu is going to come in. The Amoonguss does have the ability to Terastallize though, so it does have that at its disposal here and could be pretty good in this situation, especially against that Fire-type Chi-Yu.
I'm going to be a bit surprised. I'm going to call out a bit of a surprise situation. I didn't expect the Fluttermane not to be brought here. It was so good with having the availability of getting additional speed control via the Icy Wind. So Sebastian may have to even try to rely on, if he can pick up a KO on the Amoonguss and get Trick Room set up, he should be able to run this game through.
Yeah, but that's the problem. I think Wolfe identifying that, going for the Moonblast and that Protect onto the Amoonguss. Not quite enough to pick up the Chi-Yu. It goes all in on the Amoonguss, but blocked by that Protect here, leaving the Farigiraf to go for the Trick Room.
There it is, but unfortunately, it feels like we're in a scenario that the Amoonguss does have the advantage, so Sebastian did really need to hope the Amoonguss Protect wasn't coming out there, neither the Terastallization, and all of a sudden, we're now in the dominion of the little mushroom.
Yeah, we are, and it can't really go for a Spore here. Put either of these targets to sleep. The Fluttermane not in the best of positions here, of course, but there is going to be the problem where Wolfe's Tailwind's going to end, and Sebi's is still going to be intact, even though the Trick Room's up.
Yeah. I think that is a very likely situation too. However, we do have the final Terastallization reveal being the Water Terror on the Amoonguss, just wanting to make sure it is no longer susceptible to any sort of outrageous overheat KOs.
Yeah, and this is really going to protect it well if it needs protecting at all, because the Sludge Bomb picks up a big knockout into that Chi-Yu.
Yeah, it really does, and it sort of allows the scenario where at least you're going to have the Fluttermane going down now, but you have the redirection available on this Amoonguss, so I wouldn't be completely surprised seeing the Throat Spray enable activation via the Hyper Voice in the following turn. But the problem is, the Amoonguss already locks this game down.
Yeah, it could put the Farigiraf to sleep this next turn, which frees up the Urshifu just to close this down. Unfortunately, you can go for the Surging Strikes pretty carefree here if you are the Urshifu on one side of the field and lock this down. Unfortunately, just not got the resources to see out this end game.
And there it is, the Spore targeting down the Farigiraf. Of course, this has sort of been a end of business play. Surging Strikes following up straight after. We know there's no recovery options on this Farigiraf, so even if it doesn't pick up the get KO'd in this turn, it will be in the following.
Yeah, the big question is, will it be the Amoonguss picking up the knockout with the Sludge Bomb, or will it be that Urshifu with the Surging Strikes? Unfortunate for Sebi, he is in the position here, the Tailwind ending for him now, but not in the best spot. When the Amoonguss is still on the field, the Trick Room was just not the favorable play, but we aren't seeing the Amoonguss go for an attack, going for a Rage Powder instead, protecting that Urshifu.
It is, and this is going to be going ahead and spelling the end of our day one here in the EUIC. Surging Strikes goes ahead, gets the job done, and we've got Wolfe Glick going into day two.
Absolutely incredible game for us to cap off an absolutely incredible day. Commiserations to Sebastian, a hugely massively well played game, but even bigger congratulations to Wolfe Glick, who is progressing on to day two of this tournament here in London this weekend.
And in what fashion as well. Very critical conditions from the board state positions of both of these trainers. It was very tantalizingly close onto whether, you've got the advantage of speed control. That was the name of the game, essentially. So do you have the additional jump onto the opponent via the Icy Wind potential or Tailwind, staggered Tailwinds, as we saw Sebastian was able to have there. But the most crucial point was he was hoping to try to pick up a KO onto the Amoonguss. It just said, you know what, I'm just going to take a one-turn break, check out, see what the Farigiraf is going to do, and it just set up Trick Room. It's like, okay, cool. Thanks for having me, bro.
And that was the problem in Game 3, and I think identified by Wolfe so well. Coming out the traps here, Sebi going with that Terrakian lead, getting the Rock Slide off, removing the Tornadus turn 1, eliminating that Tailwind from the rest of the game. You felt like Sebastian was in a great position, but utilizing that U-turn was huge, taking down the Terrakian, making it... essentially terrestrializing it to get around the Flutterman weakness. You're weakening yourself against that U-turn, which was at its detriment, unfortunately.
I'm not going to lie, I'm a bit disappointed that Terrakion was the sort of piece that led to the destruction of its remaining partner Pokemon there. It's quite tough because Sebastian was sort of in a position where he was trying to play on whether Wolfe makes that read. And it's like, you know what? No, I'm going to expect Wolfe to go on the defensive, not try to go on the offensive there. But Wolfe was like, I don't have any other safe option. At least I guarantee being able to bring that Amoonguss in with the U-turn onto the slot, even if, let's say, it's a new Pokemon that Sebi does try to rotate in instead.
Yeah, and what do you think about the idea? I really thought we were going to see the beat-up combination played out in turn 1. I think beat-up and then the Rock Slide, which the Terrakion had room to do. We saw the Tornadus lock in with the Tailwind, and then the Flutterman fire off the Dazzling Gleam. Terrakion surviving, Whimsicott taking a bit of damage, beat up, Rock Slide, you potentially take down both. You don't take down the Tornadus there, but you might take down the Flutterman, and that could swing the balance a little bit differently in that match. But of course, ifs, buts, and maybes, don't need to hear about that because we've got Wolfe ready on stage to talk us through that last match and what it feels like to progress to day 2.
You'd be forgiven for thinking we were back in 2011, trainers, with that Whimsicott and Terrakion on stream. But no, we're here in 2024 at EUIC with your winner of Swiss Round 9, Wolfe Glick. Wolfe, how are you feeling?
Oh, thank you. Wow, an applause. I feel very stressed. Oh my goodness, that match, I looked at it and I was like, ah, okay, like Tornadus pretty strong, Urshifu pretty strong, and then I started playing it and I thought, why did I think this was in my favor again? It was so difficult. So very relieved, very stressed. I think if you looked closely, my hands are shaking, but you can't see that because you're at home and I'm here on the stage. So yeah, overall really good.
Good, well you can breathe a sigh of relief right now, Wolfe. Yeah, and I mean, speaking of going back in time, speed, time in general seemed to be a big element of that match. First of all, game 1, that Farigiraf under Tailwind, that outsped your choice Scarf Urshifu. How are you feeling then?
I was like, turn 1 happened, and I was like, great, this is good. And then turn 2 happened, and I thought, well, that's just about the worst thing that could happen. I asked Sebi after the set, because I was like, oh my goodness, your Farigiraf is so fast. And it was coincidentally 1 speed point faster than my Urshifu. So it was close there, but he did have the speed advantage, and I didn't even consider it. So yeah, when Urshifu went down, I thought that it was a pretty good chance that I was going to lose, but I honestly don't really know how I won game 1, but I think I somehow managed to do it. I think dodging a Snarl definitely helped.
Yeah, it seemed like your back was against the wall, but then just able to turn it around, Sludge Bomb into the Terra Grass Chi-Yu, that was crucial. And then heading into game 2, saw some Trick Room going up instead. That went to Sebi. Talk us through that.
Yeah, so I mean, I again felt like the lead was in my favor, but Sebi just continuously, like, got the right calls. Like, in that position, I'm thinking, okay, well, I can, like, Rain Dance and just Terra Water Surging Strikes and take out Farigiraf, and if he does anything other than Tailwind, then, like, I'll just get a kill for free, basically. But yeah, he just kind of called the bluff and said, like, you know what, like, I'm not worried about you, Wolf, and missing a Bleak Wind, which, I mean, it's Bleak Wind Storm, so you're going to miss, but missing a Bleak Wind on the Whimsicott, giving it an extra turn, like, yeah, like, I didn't really have much for the Farigiraf. It felt like after that, I kind of passed up on taking the KO the first turn. So, and the speed booster Terra Fairy Fluttermane was so strong. I was trying to position to an endgame where, oh my god, I'm going so in the weeds, sorry. I was trying to position to an endgame. I was like, well, Urshifu and Tailwind could probably clean this up because the last Pokemon's probably Chi-Yu, but I just couldn't get through the offense. The speed of the Fluttermane and the damage of both of them. But yeah, I was a little bit stressed when I lost game 2, to say the least.
No need to apologize for getting down in the weeds, Wolf. It was fascinating to hear from you about the nuts and bolts of that matchup. And then zooming ahead to game 3, Trick Room came out towards the end, but slightly too little too late. You were able to get the advantage early doors.
Yeah, so what I noticed about both games 1 and games 2 was that I terastallized really early, and both times I found myself really wishing I had terastallization later, especially for a Moongus, so it could, like, deal with the Farigiraf a little bit better. So I like did this kind of cheeky turn 1 play game 2 with Terra Ghost to deny Hyper Voice, but it didn't really get me that much ground in the end, and so I thought, like, okay, I'm going to save my Terra, and I wanted to really focus on preserving a Moongus, because I thought that a Moongus in the endgame against Fluttermane, if I Terra Water, I can handle Chi-Yu and Farigiraf, and I can redirect attacks to my partners. Like, that was really my main focus of the game, and I think ultimately it also helped that it made it so that I wasn't susceptible to losing to a Trick Room sweep, which could have really been very dangerous there. But yeah, holding a Moongus, just saying, if you set up Trick Room, like, I have the most valuable Pokemon, I think was a really, really good decision, and I think ultimately is what led to my victory.
Amoonguss being the MVP. Who could have seen that coming? Amoonguss. Not that good in VG, is it? Yes, it really, really is. Okay, so Wolf, you've made it through to day 2. Huge relief for you. How are you feeling?
You know, I feel relieved. I had a really strange schedule today. I played against 2 more standard teams and 7 teams that I played against almost none of in my practice. So I'm a little disappointed in the sets that I lost. My opponents were incredible, and they played so well, but both sets there were games where I, like, had a pretty high percentage chance to win and just managed to outplay me and steal it back. But I feel like if I'd been a little more dialed in, I would have been able to, like, find a win there, because my position was just so much better. So I had hoped to go 8-1 or 9-0, but honestly, I'm just so grateful. And Europe has such strong Pokemon players. Like, coming to EUIC and making day 2, like, of course I would have liked to do better, but when facing off against one of the strongest regions in the world and some of their best players, like, I definitely can't be upset with myself at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. Lovely to have that little shout out to the EU region as well here. Wolf coming up against it, but coming out on top for this day at least. And you have the luxury now, a bit of time to reflect heading into day 2. Now, Wolf, tell me. Question on everyone's lips. Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I love all the Kanto starters, but I'm gonna have to say Squirtle, and my reason is, when I was a kid, my mom, when my brother and I were moving slowly, she'd be like, all right, like, off we go, like a herd of turtles. And then we discovered Squirtle because I got into Pokemon, and to this day, she still says, off we go like a herd of Squirtles, and I really love it. So yeah, I think Squirtle because of my mom.
What a touching note. We've had 3 Bulbasaurs and 3 Charmanders today. You're the first Squirtle in our winners' interviews. That is absolutely fantastic to hear. Sigh of relief, sorry, 4 Bulbasaur, 4 Charmander. So Squirtle really not getting much love. So thank you for that there, Wolf. Finally, any shout-outs you want to give?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I just want to say a big thank you to Sebi, my last opponent there. I mean, I know from first-hand experience that being 1 win away from making day 2 and just barely, like, not doing it, especially on stream, it feels really bad. And he just handled it with such grace and, like, class. And yeah, he's, like, such a stand-up guy, and yeah, just like a real gem, honestly. And so, like, if I was gonna play against somebody on stream, I was happy to play against him because I knew win or lose, like, I could be happy in the outcome. Yeah, and of course, like I have a lot of support from back home. A lot of my friends and family are watching, and of course my Pokemon friends here: Aaron, Brendan, Billa, Marcus, Yuki, Dylan, Trey, Ed, all back home. I'm sure there's people I'm forgetting as well. My lovely producer Doug, who's here helping us with the video that we'll hopefully be able to make on this. Fingers crossed. We'll see how tomorrow goes. But yeah, I really feel like ultimately like I'm just like a regular guy surrounded by extraordinary people. And yeah, I definitely feel that when I come to these events and see other people, like my friends and trying their best and doing so well. And yeah, like my loved ones and family back home rooting for me. So yeah, I've just been extraordinarily lucky, and I really don't take it for granted.
Touching words indeed there, and I said it at the start of the day, I'll say it at the end. It takes a village to raise a Pokemon trainer. Thank you so much, Wolfe. Well, that truly is the World Champ difference, and for Wolfe, that win was immense.